Welcome to the first session, and let me sort of flag off the session by just pointing out what we'll try and focus in this session, ladies and gentlemen, is we'll start with a puzzle and then we'll talk about a paradox. The puzzle was, or the puzzle is in fact, that Odisha, as Raj mentioned in his speech, used to be below the Bimaru states before, let's say, 2000, or certainly before the 1980s. In fact, the aggregate growth rate was almost 2.77%, which is much below the Hindu rate of growth of India, which was 3.5%. Whereas today, as Dr. Santosh Panda, one of our panelists today, he's calculated, and he'll elaborate during our first session, that the aggregate growth rate has almost shot up to 9.2 if you take the figures from 2000, 2001 to 2011, 2012. So that's the puzzle, and we will talk about the paradox as we move ahead. So I was waiting for Dr. Pani. I just see him arriving. So let's welcome former Chief Secretary Subhas Pani as in the panel, please. Give a strong round of applause. In fact, I began by talking to Dr. Pani about the economics of the state, and then soon found out that he's one of the great writers of, Odisha culture, whether it comes to, the Jagannath festival or the dance, and in fact, Khokar in the morning pointed it out to me. So, second, Dr. Santosh Panda. In fact, when I started, inspired by Raj, when I started the study of Odisha, the first person that I met was Dr. Santosh Panda. He has been former director of Delhi School of Economics. Right now, he is the vice president of South Asian University, and he has just put together, along with economist Pulin Nayak and Prashant Patnaik, a brilliant book on Odisha's economic development, and I would sort of recommend the book very strongly to the audience. It has been brought out by Oxford University Press. Third speaker, in fact, part of the panel, Dr. Sudhakar Panda, Vice-Chancellor. Most of you know him much more than I do. In fact, we just met this morning. And another sort of very well-known economist, in fact, ended up writing on the same subject several brilliant articles. And then we have Dr. Padmaja Mishra, Vice-Chancellor, Ramadevi University. She has actually focused on the environmental aspects of economic development. I mean, economics always has a sort of negative fallout at times on environment. So we have someone from that perspective. And then the industry secretary, Sanjeev Chopra, he wanted to join this panel because unfortunately he has to leave in between. So he was part of the second panel. Second panel is also on industrialization. Let me start with Dr. Pani, the senior-most former chief secretary. So when I started the study of Odisha, I thought it was part of the Bimaru states, as Raj pointed out. In fact, now Bimaru is spelled with B-I-M-A-R-O-U. But when I studied further with the help of Dr. Santosh Panda and others, we suddenly saw that there has been a remarkable transformation since the year 2000. In fact, if you want to capture it in very simple terms, the economic growth rate, as we pointed out, 9.2% in this period. In fact, even if you take 2003 as the starting figure, about 8%. Whereas in the past, Odisha was chugging along at a growth rate much below the country's average. Now, why do you think so, with your experience? What is the explanation behind this puzzle?
Some of the points which were mentioned by Ajit will cover during the course of the year. But what is important perhaps is the topic was Resurgent Odisha, and the impression I got from him, we are looking ahead to the next decade and see how we can take it forward. So my short presentation, we have constraint of time, I know, because of the first session having extended. But I think I would like to make some statements, and then we should set you thinking. And then, because first of all, I always used to tell members of Team Odisha when I had the opportunity of being Chief Secretary, but also the Chief Development Commissioner, Chief Secretary incidentally is also Chief Development Commissioner, and I had the opportunity of working as Secretary Planning Commission and had the opportunity to see a 360-degree view of the development spectrum. I always used to say that Odisha must carve its own destiny. And that's very important. I do not say that we are out of India or anything, but what I mean by this statement, Odisha must carve her own destiny, is that we must have an eclectic approach. Certain things and policies will be decided at national level, and certain things will be given to you. But within those given framework, we have to develop our own strategy, and I would suggest that we should look at, some of you may be familiar with a small booklet which Dr. A.N. Khosla, once a governor of Odisha, had written, The Decade of Destiny. That was in the context of the multipurpose river valley projects. And he had, of course, visualized Tikarpada and other things. But we can think of a new decade of destiny for resurgent Odisha and industrialization. Now, industrialization cannot happen in a vacuum. It has to happen with various other environment. Raj definitely talked about Odisha's, the environment, its geographic location, with the eastern Ghats skirting on its western side, a long coastline. We have a variety of agroclimatic zones. Now, we have to factor in these things and start developing a strategy which is unique to Odisha's needs and potential. Also, looking back, he did mention about the Ashoka's eyeing Odisha because of the long coastline, and then made comparisons with Gujarat, which I think that will need a separate discussion. But I think there also is a story about the potential of Odisha, this long coastline, and I'll come to that in a minute. We have also to take an entrepreneurial and an opportunistic approach, opportunist not in its pejorative sense, but taking advantage of the situation. Now I'll talk a little bit about the Sagarmala project, which has just been announced, and what Odisha can benefit you. What is important is that rather than going to generalities, we must have specific and concrete ideas about, and a clarity of vision must be there. There must be a clear vision about overall where we want to go, what do we want to do. We know. I mean, just to put it in a nutshell, Odisha has been neglected and great injustice has been done from the time of independence. One important thing was that freight equalization. One single thing has held back Odisha. Railway was never developed in Odisha, and there was freight equalization. That has put us back by a. Second, just I will make a very short point. Take out Reliance and compare the GDP of Odisha with Gujarat. You will get a completely different picture. So GDP, the economists are sort of obsessed with GDP. GDP is not always giving you the true picture. Take out the output of Reliance Industries, and the total picture will completely change when you compare these two.
But so now that you made that point, let me just point out that Gujarat constitutes 40% of India's exports alone.
That's all right.
Whereas Odisha is no match for Gujarat when it comes to export.
No, why should we go into export?
Given the fact that you are a coastline state, sir.
We may be a coastline state. I'll come to that in a minute. You must give me time to develop this.
We'll come back to it, sir. Let's go back around the panel. Otherwise, it'll...
Just a second.
We'll come back to you, sir.
I'll just make one short point because of this particular session about industrialization. Everybody knows about the mineral resources of Odisha and what happened. I think the last decade, or little over 12 years, has been a golden period. And just to give you one short year, Rourkela steel plant was 1 million tons per annum when it started. Today we have 25.4 million tons installed capacity. Right. A colossal achievement by any global standards. So let us not forget what has been achieved, and we have done it in a very short time of 12 years. The whole country's steel output we have overtaken by twice. So we have also done a lot of things. There are a lot of things to be done. No, we have to accept that. But I think I've made this short point.
Okay.
Then we
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Very good point. I mean, this Rourkela steel plant point that you made is absolutely extraordinary. Let me sort of move to Dr. Santosh Panda. Dr. Panda, let me throw back the question that I began with, especially because the former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan in 2013 did a study of all the Indian states and came to a very harsh conclusion about Odisha. He pointed out, and I have shared that article with you, or at least the reporting of that article, Odisha is at the bottom of all the 29 states in this country. Of course, he used 10 sort of parameters of development. So here is the Raghuram Raj panel report, no less than the former RBI governor. And here is Dr. Santosh Panda, from whose book I learned that Odisha has had a 9.2% economic growth rate in the 10 years between 2000 to 2011-12, right, sir? Now, which is the puzzle in this case, sir? Whether Odisha, why is it at the bottom of the 10 or 28 states, or the puzzle that Odisha has grown from almost 2.77 to 9.22?
Well, both these statements can be consistent. Now, what we report in our book, what comes out from our research, is that up to 2003, the state was growing at an average of only 3.4%. But 2003, there is an upturn. And the average rate of growth after 2003 averages about 8%, 8 to 9%. Now, this is the state's GDP. Now, state GDP growth may not still be sufficient to offset the deficiency in other parameters, for example, the social sector. So it is perfectly possible that a state growing at that high rate can still be at the bottom when we take not only the growth parameter, but 9 other parameters. So when you are reporting Raghuram Rajan's report that Odisha is still at the bottom, they are not just considering GDP growth. They are considering 10 parameters. And out of those 10 parameters, in fact, GDP does not figure in one of the 10 parameters. They look at the per capita consumer expenditure instead of GDP. That's number one. And the two other parameters which occupy primary position among the three is the social sector, where is health and education.
So what you're saying that in HDI, Odisha hasn't done so well, whereas when it came to economic growth, Odisha has done better.
Exactly. It is possible. It's just like some state or some country doing very well in terms of GDP, but may not be doing very well in terms of HDI index. Both are consistent.
Let me stop you here, because let me go to, I will come back to all the speakers all over again. This is like a debate. So, Dr. Sudhakar Panda. Sir, now the bulk of this 9.2% growth seems to be, from my reading of what Dr. Panda and others wrote, the bulk seems to be coming from the transformation in the so-called manufacturing and mining sector. Is that correct? And if not, please explain what brought about this remarkable transformation.
Well, I look at it from a different angle.
Okay.
See, what are the factors which cause sustained growth for an economy? If you look at Odisha, you will be surprised, in fact, that in state, compared to other states, we have a sustained, stable political regime committed to the development of the people, development of the state. Number one, when you have a sustained political stability, the policies which are formed, I'm not referring to any party, the policies which are formed by a political regime, this has the advantage of continuity, no disruption in political framework or political policy framework. So once you have stability at the political level, continuity of policies relating to agriculture, industry, informal sector and social sector, naturally you will expect the overall development to be reflected in a higher rate of growth.
So thank you, but let me ask you another question right on the same subject. Again, sir, look at Gujarat.
Please.
17 years of political stability in Odisha, 22 years of political stability in Gujarat, right? You had the BJD ruling Odisha in the last 17 years from 2000. You had the BJP ruling under Prime Minister Modi as the Chief Minister equally successfully for several terms. Now, why is it, again, if political stability is the main reason, why didn't Odisha actually catch up to Gujarat, sir? In terms of economic growth, in terms of agricultural transformation, in terms of industrial growth?
Well, if you compare the state of Odisha with the development perspective scenario in Gujarat, perhaps we are not doing justice to it. The reason being, we are two different states, we have different natural resources, we have certain advantages, certain inbuilt disadvantages. And moreover, the process of development in Gujarat started early. There are historical regions tracing to the British period which may be taken into account to explain the process of underdevelopment in the state. So therefore, saying that has developed, and being a coastal state, the two coastal states does not by itself determine the process and the pace of development of a region.
Let me go back to Sanjeev Chopra. You're sort of Secretary Industry. Let me sort of start with that question, and then of course you can put in your opening remarks. Dr. Sudhakar Panda said, well, not quite comparable. Let me again stress the comparison here. Both the states have a very large tribal population. Both the states have a very large coastline, as we talk. Take Gujarat. Gujarat is actually much more rain-fed than Odisha. Odisha owns almost 10% of India's water. Gujarat doesn't even own more than 3 to 4%. So Gujarat is at a disadvantage when it comes to water, main irrigation. And let's look at another indicator. Odisha owns 20% of country's mineral wealth. Gujarat doesn't. So what is it? I mean, Odisha seems to have all the advantages, except that it's in the east where the sun rises, and Gujarat is in the west where the sun sets. What is the reason, as Industry Secretary, tell me, why don't we have the kind of dynamism in this so-called manufacturing and other sectors which we see in Gujarat?
Well, Dr. Panda did mention about the historical reasons why we cannot really compare the development that Gujarat has witnessed over the past 50 years to what Odisha has been witnessing. There are historical reasons. Besides that, the fact also remains that in Odisha, we had these historical inequities which have been meted out to the state. Freight equalization is one which was mentioned by Mr. Pani. Even today that continues. We have in fact, the numbers show that the power generation in Odisha has gone up from 5,000 megawatts in 2000 to 17,500 megawatts in 2017. While the state is producing so much of thermal power and in fact exporting it to other states, we are bearing the brunt of the negative externalities of this particular power generation, and still we are also contributing to the clean energy cess. So it's quite ironical that while we are bearing this burden of the pollution that thermal power causes, we also contribute to the clean energy cess.
Sanjeev, just let me stop you and ask you one more question on the same point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Okay, forget the comparison between Gujarat and Odisha. Let's take the comparison between two coastal states in eastern India. Odisha, West Bengal. West Bengal also suffered from freight equalization that Dr. Pani and Dr. Panda made the point. So did Odisha. But look at West Bengal. West Bengal is not in the Biharu comparison. It's in the higher state of comparison in terms of any parameter, whereas Odisha is not. They are contiguous states. Why?
See, HDI already was mentioned by Dr. Panda that there are studies to show that HDI did not really progress to the desired extent in the first 30-40 years of Odisha's formation. However, if you see the latest reports, it is very apparent that whether in terms of maternal indicators, the mortality indicators, Odisha is doing much better than the national average. So I think I would rather suggest that let's move away from this kind of a comparison and rather talk about what Odisha has done over the past 1.5 decades or 17 years. If you see the figures, and I think we started with quoting the figures, the figures show that, in fact, the latest report of ASSOCHAM, which has come out just about 10 days back, and shows that Odisha is number 3 in the list of states which have attracted investment. That also shows that while the total contribution of Odisha to the factory output was just 2% in 2008-9, it has doubled in a period of 5 years. To 2013-14, it's now 4%. So these are remarkable figures for any state. To have this kind of a jump in a span of 5 years is not a mean achievement. Secondly, I'd like to point out that even in the past 1 year, from 2015-16 to 16-17, while we had live manufacturing year-to-year growth of 16%, the national average was just about 4%. So there are facts and figures to show that Odisha, there's a success story that needs to be told. There are historical baggages that we are carrying. Rather than crying over those issues which have actually impacted our growth, we should look at the future and see how we can make the most of it.
Thank you, Sanjeev. The point very well made. Let me turn to Dr. Padmaja Mishra. You have actually studied industrialization in terms of its negative externalities, right? The impact it has had on so-called, let's say, the environment, let's say the way exploitation through mining has taken place. You tell me that in this period since 2000, when Odisha has been transforming, what kind of negative externalities have you identified as the main sort of constraints for, let's say, a further growth in the future?
Thank you very much. I would put it in one word, that is paradox of plenty. We are having
Could you repeat that once more?
Paradox of plenty.
Okay.
We have too much of resources, but what is called in economics as resource curse, we have gone through that. It is, we have gone through that means we have enough resources, but we have not been able to utilize those resources to the advantage of the state's growth or development. There is one thing called growth sustainability in quantitative terms, and there is another thing called overall development sustainability or resource sustainability. So we have to examine these two. These are actually two sides of the same coin. Without overall resource sustainability, we cannot have growth sustainability. You mentioned Professor Panda says 9.2% growth rate during the period of 2003 to 2011. And thereafter it declined. I have observed that aggressive mining and aggressive exploitation of mineral resources and mineral-based manufacturing industries, that has boosted our growth, which was not sustained. One reason why it was happening is that rising in prices of iron and steel in the global market, and Odisha is rising on the high tide. So that is why we experienced that growth, but we did not care about sustainability of that growth. That is why after 11 and 12, we experienced a slump.
So, ma'am, actually what you're saying is that aggressive industrialization followed in the industrial policy of 2001, 2007 was actually neither sustainable, and perhaps not very beneficial for the state, right?
It was beneficial for the state. So I am not saying that it is not beneficial, but it could have been sustained. The reason is we have been having a very focused, very one-sided kind of development, only mineral-based. We have not been able to diversify that. We have not been able to add value addition. If you look at the share of value addition after 11-12 to the manufacturing industries, it has declined from around 20% to 4.5%. So that is a problem in our policy. We have to diversify it. We have to anchor it to all the drivers of growth, not only mining based. That is my view.
Thank you, ma'am. In fact, Dr. Padmaja Mishra raised a very, very interesting point. Now what we will do is we'll not do an interstate comparison. Let's hammer in and see the comparison between the earlier time period and the later time period, as Mr. Chopra suggested. And what is interesting, what she is pointing out, Dr. Pani, she is pointing out that what I thought at one time was the strength of Odisha's industrialization, this massive, aggressive industrial growth rate. She is pointing that out as not really sustainable, and therefore the dip in the growth rate after 2011. So it has come down from 9.2 to 7% according to Dr. Santosh. Panda's figures, some other figures point out even lower than 7% growth. Would you agree with that, Dr. Pani?
Many of these things are not black and white situations, first of all. Secondly, the global scenario and the national scenario changes. But let me bring you back to some of the, just couple of short points I will make about this injustice and the historical baggage which you have been carrying, post-independence, pre-independence also.
But sir, remember that West Bengal also shared it.
I am coming to that,
Okay.
I'll coming to that. So just to start, we'll come back to that. On the power-related point which Sanjeev mentioned, you know, as per the Central Electricity Act, the consumption is taxed, but not the production. So whatever power goes from Odisha to outside, we are not paying a single paisa. In fact, I had discussed this with Dr. Manmohan Singh. I said that the simple solution is allow us to, charge CST on power, in which case the money will come back to the state government. For every 1 megawatt power which is generated, if it goes to Tamil Nadu will generate a revenue of say 20 crores or 30 crores, and Odisha will pay that cost which Padmaja is mentioning of negative of 10 crores or something. Now that's a larger issue, I don't want to go into that, but if there is time we can discuss these issues, because we are constantly hammered with this historical comparison. Now let's leave it at that and let us talk about the sustained growth. Now 24.5 million capacity has already been added. Number of capacity...
In steel, sir, right?
Steel. Okay. Now the capacity is also, some other things are in the pipeline and will go. What is important when I say Odisha must carve her own destiny, and we must have an eclectic approach. Our approach has to be slightly different in the next decade. And there I would suggest that our approach should be, one would be value addition. Already an aluminium park is coming, because otherwise aluminium was going from here to Maharashtra, it will get processed there, and all construction industry, electric industry, everybody will use that. So we will try to see that maximum value is added Odisha. So one beginning has been made. A stainless steel park needs to be, made here, somewhere around Jajpur. That will give lot of value. The other thing what Padmaja says is about the environment. Can we have a situation where 100% of our ash is converted into brick? 100%. This problem of ash pond and this damage to the crop, which is from time to time it happens, Bangladesh is prepared to take 100% of your ash. Just give the ash, they will be able to take it. Let us have a situation which will then benefit us both ways. It will help the SMEs, 100% of the ash can be converted, red mud can be converted. So waste conversion could also be one of the planks. I am not saying that these are the only. We have to have an eclectic approach. Then SMEs. SMEs have one of the sectors like transformers and other things required for the electricity distribution sector. Odisha was among the pioneers in the country. It was killed the moment the distribution was privatized, and I don't want to name the company, and they started buying from outside. Till the Odisha State Electricity Board was there, these were very vibrant industries, including electricity cables. Now, as I said, as the situation changes, we should have the resilience to adapt. And that is where I said that we must be opportunistic. Now, we have got, apart from steel, we have also cement. Now, you talked about the railway line to Malkangiri. It serves no purpose because it's a dead end. This loop line is not going to help us. We have to connect it to Kothagudam in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana. In which case what will happen, there is a huge limestone deposits in that area. Coal also. If we can generate cement and other things, then value addition will be there. Otherwise, what is happening, you are talking of the mineral industries. What is the game changer? Once was the freight equalization. Now, after the fiscal rearrangement, Government of India is imposing cess and taking away all our money. They are generating much more revenue from states like Odisha and other coal-rich states. This was another battle which we have fought, and fortunately from the fixed rate to ad valorem, it took us almost 5 decades to get that justice from Government of India. This is what is happening in India. But nobody is prepared to understand. It was Mr. Y.B. Reddy in the last Finance Commission who increased the share of the states and distributed about 40% of that money which went into the divisible pool. We don't realize these things. And this is what is holding back. Otherwise, while the budget of Odisha has increased, it would have been much higher by at least another 50% if these injustices were not continuing. If you are trying to And what is happening in this process, and GST has that built-in, the finance minister rightly pointed out, that built-in disadvantage for the states which are currently consuming states is going to hit us, and it's going to hit us hard. So, some eclectic approach has to be followed while we have to swim with the tide because we can't be away from the national framework, but within that, while we'll keep on fighting to sort of change the arrangement, we have also to take an eclectic approach and adjust ourselves, be resilient, and also tweak our policies and tweak our strategies and priorities so that we can, Now, the last point I made about the export which you mentioned, and our coastline and compared to Gujarat as the coastline.
I can come back to
just one second, because it's interesting, because once the debate has been started, because I was going to talk about it anyway, look at the historical thing. One railway line was done from Calcutta to Chennai. That was what Odisha had. Second is the national highway, which used to be called National Highway number 5, again the same route. If you look at the map of Odisha, Raj did mention about it, you have the Eastern Ghats on the western side. There was no second parallel line cutting through Odisha. One road we visualized, it is the Ranchi-Vijayawada road in the name of Naxalite problem and all that, and that is only the second road which is cutting across Odisha and going all the way. Now the time has come to sort of rationalize a little bit and do that. Then there has to be a number of roads cutting. Now in the Bharatmala project, what has happened? Only through Rourkela that Nagpur is being linked. Nothing between that point to the southern point at Motu. We have to have 3 or 4 lines.
Let me move on. We'll come back to you, sir. Otherwise, we'll never finish this debate.
Let me just complete.
You're running out of time, sir.
Just let me complete. Because, let me make another statement. Just as I said that Odisha needs to carve her own destiny, it is in Odisha's development that India's interest lies. Earlier we were looking west, now we are looking east. If you, the Vindhyas which are dividing south and north, and also if you draw a simple cross across the India's then about 40% of India's export can go through Odisha. And if you are having a look-east policy, then these roads, these railway lines are necessary for India.
Very good point, sir. Thank you. Dr. Panda, let me, very good point. In fact, two questions to you, Dr. Panda. One arising from Dr. Padmaja Mishra's point, and you were the one who measured the growth rate in this period. Why did it decline after 2011-12, down from 9.2% to 7% according to your estimate, according to others even much below 7%? Why, sir? And don't give me the answer to begin with that it is part of the general decline of the country.
Well, that is the answer. There's nothing else I can add. You see, if you look at the GDP growth rate, it always fluctuates. Yeah. So certain years, GDP growth rate is 12%. Look, 2004, 5, 6, 7, it was running very high. Then it declined. So Odisha has to conform with the national trend. It cannot be that the national average is 4% and Odisha will grow at 14%. It cannot happen. We are part of the country, so whatever happens at the global level, at the national level, Odisha will be affected.
Now that you said,
one sentence. But what remains a fact is that Odisha, all these years, after 2003, has done better than the national average. You know, that's the strong point I want to make.
Applause for that. Wonderful point.
What are the other questions?
So the question was, you said national trends always affect state trends. I will not take the issue of industrialization, but let me take a point which we will come in the subsequent debate, agricultural growth rate. So the entire country is seeing that in the last 3 years, agricultural growth rate is fluctuating in the country between minus to 1.2 to 4%, but in Madhya Pradesh, the agricultural growth rate is above 14% consistently. So it's not true what you're saying, sir, that each state has to follow the trend in the so-called
see, you are suffering from this dilemma. You cannot, see, the overall average can give you a story which is different from a particular sector. So, agriculture scene in Odisha is not comparable, certainly, to the best of states.
That's right.
Okay, we are not discussing agriculture, it's coming at a later stage, but agriculture in the state hasn't performed as well as I will expect it to. Look at the productivity figures. Rice is the main crop that we produce in Odisha, and per hectare, we produce only 2 metric tons. Whereas Punjab, it doubles. Look at Haryana, it's 3.2 metric tons per hectare. So productivity in Odisha is not as good as other agricultural producing states. Now, therefore, we have to focus on agriculture. Yes, industrialization important, but 70% of our population, they live in the rural areas. Agriculture is their main occupation. If we have to target poverty reduction, then agriculture is the main sector that is to be focused. And lot of work needs to be done in the agricultural sector. So that remains to be. Yeah.
Dr. Sudhakar Panda, before I come back to you, because something Dr. Pani pointed out a question. So let me go back to Sanjeev Chopra, because he is the industry secretary. Dr. Pani made a very interesting point, Mr. Chopra. He said that the success in industrialization, in fact, Dr. Padmaja Mishra also added to it, was basically in the steel and aluminium sector. Is that correct, ma'am? Because Odisha has enormous deposits of bauxite and, iron ore. How come it did not take place in the other sectors an equal transformation? You're the industry secretary. I'm going to grill you on this.
So as Dr. Pani pointed out, the state government for the past about decade and a half has been following a policy of value addition. As a result, while we just had the Rourkela steel plant about 12, 13 years back, which is producing about 2 million tons, now we have an installed capacity of 22 million tons of steel. Aluminium again, we have now the 3 aluminium majors. In fact, Odisha is the aluminium capital of South Asia. So the state government has very consciously followed a policy of value addition to mineral, which was not in place prior to 2000-2002. Secondly, now for the past few years, state government has gone a step ahead, and we are following a policy of value addition to metal. So it's just not leaving the value addition to the metal stage, but whether it's the aluminium park, which is coming up at Angul, whether it's the stainless steel park coming up at Kalinganagar, and also Jharsuguda. And similarly for steel. So there are these stainless steel and aluminium parks coming up. And I'd just like to mention, just responding to what Dr. Mishra mentioned about the diversified industrial growth, it is a fact that for the first 30, 40 years of Odisha's formation, we were primarily a mineral-based industrial state. However, in the recent past, there has been a conscious attempt by the state government to make it broad-based, to make it diversified. The state government has a vision for industrial growth, and that vision was in fact revealed or released by the Honorable Chief Minister about a year and a half back, where for the next about 8 to 9 years, so Vision 2025, where we are saying that we have now 5 focus sectors in manufacturing and 1 focus sector in services, which is tourism. So these 5 focus sectors broadly are downstream to the metal sector. We have the IT and ESDM, chemicals, petrochemicals and plastics, apparel and textiles. So these sectors would form the core of the industrial growth of the state for the next 10 years. The state has put in place a sector-specific policy. So besides that, the vision envisages that over the next 8 years, the state will have investment of about 2.5 lakh crores in these sectors to make it a well-diversified industrial base and add about 3 million jobs. So these are the ways in which state government is consciously planning to have a more diversified and a broad-based industrial growth with the kingpin of a value addition strategy.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Thank you. Dr. Sudhakar Panda, back to you, sir. 2 questions, sir, and with this we'll end up the debate. You and Dr. Mishra are going to answer these questions. One is, despite the great success in terms of an economic transformation and the success in terms of great industrialization in the last, let's say, 10 to 17 years, somehow it did not translate into employment, into jobs for the state. That's one. And number 2, as Dr. Pani pointed out, let me start with that. Can you tell the audience a little bit about the future? Are we going to see no more of this obsession with Western India, but an obsession with Eastern India? Because what is probably holding back the entire country to a large extent is the so-called Bimaru states and the eastern states of India, which had been chugging along in the past, but of late has been picking up growth. Okay. We'll start with the second question first, sir.
Yes. Your first question, please.
What I
Why,
point...
I mean, the benefits have not been reached the people. Employment.
Employment,
Fine,
sir,
fine,
jobs.
Fine. See, when you think of employment, employment has to be related to technology. If you are having industries, let's say steel industry or this industry or that industry, well, you can create technically employable people, provided there we have those employment facilities and people who are to be employed, number one. Number two, in a context where the technology is changing very fast in the world, it is not enough that you are a technically qualified person. What is more important, you should be constantly, continuously, technically upgraded. And second, there must be enough of opportunities for the people of the state for skill formation, training in skills, and in acquiring different types of expertise. It's true that at one time, a state cannot create all the opportunities that is necessary. And of course, at that time, we did not have a facilitating factor. We did not get enough of opportunities from outside or from the other industries. But over the years, we have made enough of strides, and in fact, we are making how to remove the skill gaps, how to create a technical base, and how to give the best of education, even in technology, to our students, to our young people, so that they find employment in the emerging industries of the state. And the second,
let me come back, because this is related to Dr. Padmaja Mishra's point. Dr. Padmaja Mishra, the way I understand sustainability is, the first principle of sustainability is sustainable livelihood, which actually means you only grow to create jobs. And that is what seems to be missing in this entire debate, focus on, as you pointed out, aggressive growth rate. So from that perspective, please tell us what went wrong with the industrialization strategy in the last 17 years.
That is what we require ultimately, not just growth. And we lack sustainability in the livelihood provision because industries itself created a lot of displacement of people from their place, loss of livelihoods, loss in agriculture, loss in resources, and loss in livestock and all that. So what Sanjeev ji has said just now, that new industrial policy is focusing on some core sectors. He just missed the agro industries. I would like to flag that. If we can encourage industries and include agro industries, chemical industries, etc., in our particularly agro industries, in our industrial map, then it will create a lot of linkages. What we need is a lot of forward and backward linkages to expand the industrial base and to vibrate the industrial scenario of the state. So if we can develop such industries like agro industries, then we can provide livelihood that will linking agriculture to the growth process as well, as we cannot afford to neglect agriculture. So that is what the industry has to be very, very comprehensive, and a comprehensive resource mapping and resource planning is required for proper industrialization. I am afraid we don't have that so far.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for a wonderful debate. Thank you. Thank you very much to all the panelists.